Hi guys, sorry. Just had to get everything set up for you. So hi, thank you for joining me to talk about how we can kind of look at working with fearful cats, maybe a new way of looking at working with fearful cats. And it's something that I talk to our cat comforters a lot about. The most effective way we can kind of work with them in the shelter. What tricks and tips can we try to work with those guys at the shelter? We certainly have a lot of fearful cats and kittens going to foster, so it was beyond time to kind of create some sort of resource for you guys as well. So this is that. I want to preface this a bit just by saying that, I started working at the shelter in 2001. And back then, I was taught a whole lot of very invasive ways to handle cats, to work with cats, including kind of this theory of forced loving. And, we did it at the time because we, really believed that this was the only way to do it. And it was no other effective way of doing it. And that this is the way we are going to see the most progress, right? So since then, in the last couple of decades, a lot of research has been done into working with both dogs and cats, and what's the most effective way to do that, and how can we do that without, scaring them and making things worse, and all those kinds of things. And the dog training world has really taken the lead on kind of working with dogs, fearful dogs, in a way that can be very effective and lasting and salient. The cat world, is always a little bit slower to catch up because cat people tend to be really stuck in our beliefs, right? And we are like cats, stubborn people. So, but I wanted to kind of present you with this different way, kind of a different way of thinking. And why we kind of want to move away from this idea of forced loving. What are the benefits of that? What are we actually doing to them when we kind of force them into a relationship with us? What does it all mean? So we'll kind of look at that. And so many people are utilizing so many different methods of kind of working with fearful cats. And which way is the best, who knows? So I just want to present you with this idea. This is kind of the path we take at the shelter when we're working with them. It's, anytime someone asks me how to do this, this is what I'm going to propose to them. And hopefully this information resonates with you, and we can kind of work this into what we're already doing. Although I have a feeling many of you are already doing this, many of you. It's just some more information to provide, hopefully help. So let's get started. Let's jump in here. So what's on the agenda? We're going to talk a little bit about body language and behavior. This training is for new fosters, old fosters, everything in between. So I just want to give you a broad spectrum of information so that we're all kind of on the same page and understanding and all that kind of stuff. So we're going to talk about some body language and behavior. We'll talk about what causes fear. We'll talk about, let's define what socialization and desensitization mean. What is it? What does it all mean? Well, we're going to look at getting past this idea of forced loving, kind of the whys and hows and whats. I'm going to go over some, hopefully quickly, basics of fostering, what your room setup can look like, where we're going to start with the work and all that kind of stuff. How do we use desensitization and counter conditioning for treatment and socialization? How do we do that? I will let you know you're already doing it, but we're just going to define it and talk about how we're going to do that. We'll talk a little bit about play therapy, why it's important, why sometimes it's too scary to use, but talk about some play therapy. We'll talk about how to introduce new stimuli to these guys. What does that look like? We will kind of talk about, well, what do we do if there's no improvement? Where do we go from there? And just touch on how do we know they're ready for adoption? Because I think that knowing your end goal is really important, right? So we'll jump in. So speaking of the fearful cat, let's talk about their body language and behavior. These things are important to understand because the work we're doing is really to avoid seeing this body language and behavior. The work we're doing is to change this body language and behavior, right? So let's talk about what it is that we're seeing, observing. What does it look like? They have pretty distinctive body language, right? So A fearful cat tends to have a tense, clenched body. Their legs are going to be pulled in, their tail's going to be pulled in. They're not really offering any part of their body to you because they're protecting themselves, right? So they'll have this very tense, clenched body. Often their pupils will be wide open. They're taking all of the stimulus in, trying to find where the threats are, trying to make a plan of escape or whatever they need to do. So their pupils are wide open. A cat with the more classic oval shaped pupil is going to be a more relaxed cat. Their ears will often be flat or they'll be back and kind of twitching. They are generally prepared for flight. So they're preparing all of their body for that motion, and the ears are no exception to that. They may vocalize. Sometimes they'll hiss, they'll growl. You'll hear this low yowl. It's that kind of vocalization is really a distress call when you hear that. We definitely don't want to make it to that point. So the hissing and growling tend to be the most common vocalizations you hear from these guys. They'll be avoidant of handling and interaction, meaning they're just going to move away. They may move away pretty subtly. And in conjunction with the other body language we've already talked about, you'll definitely have the sense that that cat's trying to get away from you. It can be far more kind of in your face, as they move away quickly. But that shift, that avoidant shift when you move into their space is a very typical behavior for these guys. They may not eat. We often see anorexia in fearful cats. It's far more common in adult cats to see that anorexia. A fearful kitten is still pretty fearful. Feral kitten is still pretty good at self-preservation, and they are still kittens. So eating is still something that they will engage in, even if they are fearful, under-socialized, poorly socialized, any of those things. Adult cats much more often will veer towards anorexia as they shut down and preserve energy for fight or flight. They'll stay hidden. In the shelter, we see them under their Karana beds, shoved way at the back. Sometimes they'll burrow under bedding. The same will happen in a foster home. They will remain hidden. They don't want to engage with you if they don't have to. So they will remain hidden, right? That's the safest way to go. They may have a strong flight instinct. Again, you really want to watch for all these kind of body language signals when you approach. And if that avoidant motion happens, it can often turn into a strong flight instinct. So kind of watching all of these things stack one upon the other, when we add all these things together with an avoidant moment, that can certainly turn into a moment of flight. So keep a close eye on that. They can be defensive if pushed, right? If they feel cornered, if they feel boxed in, they feel like they don't have anywhere to escape, they can certainly become defensive. As a prey and predator species, they have to be prepared to protect themselves, right? So you can see swat, bite attempts. A lot of times they'll do kind of this boxing where the paw comes out, bats at you. That's pretty common. A bite attempt would happen if you move too close into their space with kind of not paying attention to the things that were happening prior to that. They typically won't come after you. That kind of in your face defensive aggression is uncommon with these guys unless they feel very, very threatened. They prefer to hide and protect themselves from that spot. But then there's always the attempt to flee that can be combined with defensive behaviors. So again, it's all about really paying close attention to the full body, the full picture of what's going on, so that we're not pushing them to the point where they feel they must become defensive. And specific to kittens, they can kind of cycle through body language and behavior so quickly that it's easy to miss that hiss. You're already in the spot, and they've moved to step 3. So they may hiss, they may spit, they may swat, they may do all 3 of those things at once. They just cycle through that fearful behavior to defensive behavior so quickly. They've been taught very well by mom, by grandma, by aunties. So they know what they need to do to keep humans away from them. Unfortunately, they often will do that as you're in their space. And it can happen even as you think things look okay. They can cycle through that pretty quickly. So kittens have kind of they can be tricky all on their own in a different way. They also have a very strong fight or flight response. Kittens can cycle through all of this body language very quickly, leading to vocalization, and then all of a sudden they're just all flight or all fight. Typically, they lean towards flight over fight, but a kitten is not going to give you a clear progression of behavior. They're going to do exactly what they need to do to protect themselves. So they have kind of a different progression. So you really have to pay attention. And with those guys, very specifically, we stay out of their space until we've seen some kind of progress with them, mostly because they can progress through those so quickly that you just want to be a little more careful with a kitten in these instances. So I got some pictures of fearful cats. These guys are obviously all at the shelter. So just some different kind of body language that we might see, how they may position themselves, those kinds of things. So this guy over here on the left, this tiger brown and white fella, he was under his Kuranda bed. The Kuranda bed was covered, and I lifted the towel to take the picture, right? So what we see in him is these very wide pupils. His ears are a little bit forward. He's trying to figure out what's going on and what he might need to do. His whiskers, cat's whiskers do all kinds of things, right? And we don't maybe pay as much attention to whiskers as we should. But his whiskers had started to move forward a little bit and were twitching a little bit. His body is super clenched. You can't see legs, you can't see tail. Everything is protected. And he's making direct eye contact with me. He's trying to figure out what I'm up to and what he needs to do about it, right? So I took the picture and closed him back in. That's what I did. This guy, I actually believe he went to foster, if I remember right. These are all relatively recent pictures. I think late summer, early fall. So this fella in the top middle here, he actually progressed so nicely at the shelter. He was able to go up for adoption at the shelter and did get adopted. He was a quick study. He didn't remain this fearful for long, but sometimes we see cats who prefer to stay in the litter box. That feels like a safe space to them. They're completely encompassed in their scent. No matter what I do, I can't get them out of that litter box. He did eventually come out, thankfully, but litter box has high sides. He feels safe in there. So his pupils are wide open. He's got this kind of hunched back. He's actually prepared for flight. That was kind of his thing. He was all flight. So his tail's out a little bit. His legs you can't see because he's a black cat and there's not great lighting, but his legs are not fully, his front legs are not fully under him. They're out a little bit. His body, he's pushing himself up just slightly so that he can actually flee the cage. But that hunched back is kind of an indicator that flight is about to happen. He's preparing to move, but his ears are also slightly forward. His whiskers were actually completely forward. I don't think you can see them really at all in the picture, but his whiskers were also very forward. He had already made a decision when I entered the cage that flight was the way he was going. So this photo session didn't last long. The bottom middle picture is actually a kitten. He was a feral kitten. We unfortunately had to take his eye out. We had to do an enucleation on him. And with these fearful guys, when they're on eye meds, we just lose huge ground with them. That handling that's needed for eye meds just is so invasive. And there's really no great way to do the eye meds. Pairing it with desensitization and counter conditioning that is effective for the medicator in the shelter and the kitten or cat. So we lose a lot of ground with really any dog too, that's on eye meds that has any behavior concern because the handling is so invasive. So unfortunately, he had a lot of medical handling. Then he lost his eye. He was already fearful. So he was a lot of work. We were able to, in his case, I put him in an adult cage in one of our adult cat rooms, and the comforters and I were able to work with him there, and he did get adopted. He came around really nicely, although he also became kind of older and older, right, as he was there. So it was harder to get him to generalize his behavior to other people, but we were able to get him there. But so this guy's ears are flat back, right? He's hissing. He is probably growling. That was his thing, to sit on top of that Kuranda bed and hiss and growl with his ears down at us. He would strike if we moved into his space. He wasn't he wasn't much of a fleer. He didn't flee when approached. He preferred to become defensive. But so his pupils are wide open, ears are down, he's hissing. He actually has one front leg kind of out because he's about to strike. But the rest of him is all clenched pretty nicely for him. Then this fella over here on the right, he's completely burrowed. He's made a little tent out of his bed. He's under his corona bed. He's made a tent under the corona bed, and that is where he feels safest. That's what I prefer over this fella in the litter box. But each cat kind of does their own thing. This guy's what we call the burrower. You see a lot of those guys who just completely encompass themselves in this very safe thing that smells very much like only them. So that's where they kind of stay. But you can't see much of his body language, unfortunately, but his body is completely clenched. His tail is wrapped all the way around his body. His pupils are dilated. We don't know what his eyes are doing or his ears are doing because they're completely covered by this bed, right? But he's just peering out at me, and he was very focused on me, just wondering what was going on. Is she going to leave? All that kind of stuff. He, in the grand scheme of fearful cats, was one who was just shut down. You could move around in his cage, you could offer him food, you could do pretty much anything you wanted to, and he would just pretend like he wasn't there. He was really good for feigning sleep. His theory on life was that if I just pretend I'm not here, they'll go away. So he actually came around really nicely too. He took a little bit of time, but the comforters and I were able to get him to come around, and he also got adopted. And it's important to know this black cat in the middle here and this fellow that's burrowed under his bed, this is how they started out. By the time they were adopted, they were maybe not actively and eagerly seeking attention from strangers, but they certainly came out for adopters. They would retreat when they needed to, but they came out enough for an adopter to actually see them out from their hiding spot and interact with them. So that's kind of our end goal for these guys. It's okay for them to hide, it's okay for them to retreat, but we're looking to build their confidence to the point where they will come out if someone enters the cage. So that's just a little kind of aside for that guy. So I wanted to share with you a happy cat, because I mean, we like happy cats, right? So this lady was adopted pretty quickly. She had some medical issues that kept her at the shelter longer than some, but she was adopted pretty quickly. And we can see from these pictures, this bottom one here, the bottom left, that, you know, her ears are up, they're erect, they're forward. She's, you know, just taking some sensory things and figuring things out, but her ears are telling me she's happy I'm there. Her pupils are nice and oval. She's not too worried about things. You know, her whiskers are nice and relaxed. She's got, her legs are out. You know, she's in a very typical relaxed position, body position. Her tail is out. You know, she's not too worried I'm going to go in there and do anything. She's not worried if I do come in there and do anything, because in the middle here, she immediately rolled over on her side, right? So she's on her side. Her front paws are actually making muffins. Her back paws are loose. Her tail is just kind of there. But, you know, she's rubbing her face on her blanket. She's making muffins. Her pupils are still oval. Her ears are nice and forward. There's nothing about that body position that doesn't say to me, please pet me. She was a good one for asking for belly rubs, which, you know, we just avoid. But so the top right picture, she's decided she's just going to conk out and go to sleep. I apologize. I have dogs squeaking toys in the other room, but you know, she's just done. I liked the attention. I'm going to go to sleep now, but I'm going to keep making muffins while I do it because I'm so happy. So this is a very classic, easy, happy cat that we see. And you know, we can see that her body language is very different from what we saw in the last guys, right? She's loose, she's engaging, she's accepting, she's asking for interaction. So it's a squeaking, sorry. So what causes fear? So many things cause fear, right? And this list is not all inclusive by any means, but kind of in the general scheme of things for the cats we see at the shelter, these are kind of the things we're dealing with. So we see a lot of cats who have a genetic inherited fear of humans that they got from their mom, or they got it from their grandmother or their great grandmother or the aunties that are around taking care of them. In colonies, female cats are very cooperative with one another. They will raise each other's kittens, keep them around, and then kind of boot them out as they become too much to feed. So it can be genetic. A feral kitten has learned to be feral from her mom. If that kitten's grandmother is also feral, then we've got generational fear happening, which is much more difficult to work with. And the stakes change the more generational this becomes. If we've got a kitten that has lived in the wild with, surrounded by feral adult females, because dad's never around, right? He's off doing his thing somewhere else. But if they've learned from, groups of female cats to be fearful, we definitely have a kitten that's going to be more difficult to work with. Where if we have a mom who may have just been a neighborhood cat, a friendly neighborhood cat that people were feeding, who happened to get pregnant, she's social with people. That does not mean her kittens will be social with people, but it does mean that kittens at least have some experience with a social cat and perhaps with some humans being around. Those guys are going to be easier to socialize. Again, it doesn't by any means mean that they're going to come in and be social with people. What it does mean is that they know that mom has shown interaction with humans, so they have less of a distrust of humans than a generationally feral kitten might have. So we certainly see moms come in with feral kittens. It's the craziest thing. And we are always in awe of it. Like, how did this happen? I don't understand. Well, it happened because the kittens were never handled by people, right? But mom certainly was. So those guys are a little bit easier to work with, though. So poor socialization overall, little or no exposure to humans, very limited exposure to humans, will lead obviously to poor socialization with humans. But it's also true that a lack of exposure to a variety of stimulus is a cause of poor socialization, which can lead to fear. It's very, very common for us to have adult cats surrendered to the shelter who lived in a very quiet home with one caregiver, and all they know is that person in this very quiet home, right? So they come in and the shelter is just overwhelming for them. They're just being bombarded with stimulus that they don't understand, that they've had no experience with. So the shelter becomes this terrifying, acute traumatic event, right? So those guys are the ones that often end up in foster, because in many cases they're also elderly or older cats. So trying to work with them at the shelter actually becomes inhumane. They don't open up, they become anorexic, they won't engage with people, at which point they must find respite from that. And that's what foster is for. So that is such a common scenario, especially over the last couple of years. I have definitely seen this type of intake coming in more and more and more. And while the comforters are fantastic at work, they are truly fantastic at working with these guys. Often these guys just need to leave. And it's amazing, really. A lot of times we'll see these guys hit a foster home and 24 hours, 48 hours later, just be completely open, be the cat that they were prior to coming to the shelter. All they needed was some relief from the stress of the shelter. But often they do need a foster who can work with them and help them reacclimate to living in a home and all that kind of stuff, rebond with someone. When we're talking about a 13-year-old cat that has only had one caregiver in its life, I mean, that is a huge situation to overcome, right? We're asking them to bond with not only one new person, but eventually a whole family of new people in a new environment that doesn't make sense to them, that doesn't smell like them, it doesn't smell like their caregiver. Nothing is as it used to be. And that's so much to ask of these guys. So we also have negative experiences. Trauma certainly happens with people, places, things. When we say trauma, I'm not speaking of abuse. It's not common for us to see abuse, actual what one might think, a cat's been hit, the cat's been kicked, or, any of those things, or even dogs, to be honest with you. But trauma absolutely happens. We see cats surrendered who have been kind of like in this picture with this little boy and this cat, just utterly mishandled by a child or even an adult human, who doesn't know how to handle a cat. That is a negative experience. That is trauma. They've had this bad experience with someone and we need to overcome that. That person certainly didn't think they were abusing their cat, and it's not abuse per se, but it certainly caused a traumatic event that we will need to overcome. Often interactions with dogs and other cats in a previous home can lead to trauma for these guys that we have to work through. Cats that are, perpetually chased by dogs, that leads to a huge level of fear that will often translate to just a fear of everything, right? They've never felt safe. So here they are, just terrified, and we have to work through that. The there are so many things that can happen in an animal's life that we may not think of as a traumatic event, but it certainly is. So that those are all kind of things that we have to work through. Lack of consistency or routine can certainly be a negative experience for a cat, right? Cats thrive on consistency and routine. So if they're coming from a home where they were adopted or whatever, found as a kitten, and in the course of the first year of their life, their owner had a baby, and the baby just terrified this poor cat, or they got a puppy and the puppy terrified the poor cat, or the kitten was poorly socialized to begin with and they moved into a home with very small children and dogs and other cats, or all these things were happening. um, they didn't have any consistency, they didn't have any routine, perhaps they didn't receive the socialization they needed. So now we have this cat in our shelter and we need to kind of rectify all those things that had happened. So loss of caregiver, we kind of already talked about. It's a huge crisis for a lot of these cats to lose a beloved caregiver. It just, some cats bounce back from it rather quickly. I've got a couple of elderly cats in foster right now who, I mean, as awful as it is for them to have been surrendered to the shelter, they just love all people. Their trauma was relatively low. They were very well socialized, very well loved by their owner, and really they're in foster because they've got substantial medical concerns. But that case is pretty rare. Loss of caregiver for most cats is a very traumatic event. They have to be so resilient to make it through that. Change in household, we've moved, or the cat's been given away to someone else, or the routine has changed. Someone used to be home all the time and now they're never home, or the opposite, we are certainly finding is a problem for a lot of cats. But some sort of change in the household, just the environment itself, separate from other pets or children, that can definitely lead to some trauma for a cat. But we also know cats are just sensitive, right? So it could be any little thing. It could be something imperceptible that we couldn't begin to understand. So what we need to do is recognize the behavior and the body language we're seeing and respond to it appropriately. Really is kind of the bottom line for all of it. The cause of their fear may not mean a whole lot in how we're going to work with them. It certainly could mean, I've got an elderly cat whose owner passed away, very quiet home, all these kinds of things. I'm going to look for a foster home for that cat that can replicate their original home as much as possible, but the work is going to look the same, regardless of what, what we believe to have caused their fear. So socialization and desensitization, what does that mean? Um, these are psychiatric terms, right? So what are we going to do? So socialization is a process in which appropriate social behaviors are developed through exposure. When we talk about exposure, we're talking about potentially exposing them to other cats, other humans, other species, those kinds of things. Those are important. But we also want to kind of socialize them to being petted, being picked up, perhaps being held, maybe medical handling, maybe. Let's socialize them to play. Certainly, we can definitely work on them and going into a carrier without causing them any fear. Let's expose them to as much things as possible while keeping in mind that we don't want to push them past their fear threshold. And desensitization is the process of exposing the cat or kitten to a stimulus beginning at a very low intensity when we're talking about fear threshold. Counter conditioning and desensitization need to be used together to be effective and are often used to change a fear response in both dogs and cats. We're going to pair a high value reward with a fearful event at a very low intensity, and then we can condition that cat or kitten to reduce their fear in the presence of that stimulus. We're going to talk more about that later, but we've talked about the body language, right? So we know what body language we're looking at, or what we're looking for. And when we talk about their fear threshold, what we're hoping to do is to work with them in a way that doesn't cause them to revert to these kind of fearful behaviors. Okay. So the fear threshold is how far can I push this cat without pushing them backwards? So that's really kind of what that means. So let's talk a little bit about flooding, or this idea of forced loving, which is a thing that happens with cats a lot. Excuse me. Traditionally, socialization techniques favor the forced loving approach for cats. It's true even today. It's what I was taught to do. It's what I did for years as a foster parent and working in our intake department, working with the cats in my capacity as a cat behaviorist at the shelter. I have absolutely utilized this approach. Thankfully, I've kind of learned a new way. That has proven to be just as effective and less scary. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. So that involves flooding or exposing the cat to the stimulus that triggers the unwanted reaction at a close proximity. And through a prolonged time of exposure, the cat should realize that there are no actual threats present. Therefore, he'll change his response to that stimulus in the future. So, this theory behind prolonged exposure is that adrenaline and fear can only affect the body for so long, and after that, the cat will calm down. So, why doesn't that work? Why am I sitting here telling you that doesn't work? Let's kind of examine that a little bit. Well, first, it puts you at risk for bites and scratches, and not only does it put the handler at risk for bites and scratches, but it also teaches the cat at that point to resolve conflict situations by biting or scratching. So what that means is, I'm forcing this kitten to love me, and it's, trying desperately to get away from me, and it's scratching me, and I put the kitten down, right? Because now I'm injured. Well, that kitten just learned that it can resolve this conflict situation, this fearful moment of being held by scratching someone. So that is its learned response, which is the opposite of what we want, right? So it engages the fight or flight response, causing the cat to fight harder to avoid the trigger, teaching them to resolve conflict situations by fleeing. Just as it did with the kitten that's scratching us, when we pick up an adult cat and hold it and force it to, like being held, and it's trying desperately to get away from us, even if it's not injuring us, we'll put it down eventually because, it's a lot of work to hold on to, a cat that's alligator rolling on you. And we've just taught it that every time it's held, it should try desperately to get away, frantically try to get away, and it will be put down. So, it kind of won the situation. We think that we won because we forced it to do this thing, but really we taught it this great coping mechanism. I'm just going to try desperately to get away from people and they pick me up and they'll put me down. So we've done that. And it's true. This is how it works. And it's funny that it didn't occur to me that was what was happening, but it is. So it causes exhaustion. It causes the cat to shut down completely, which is often the situation when a feral kitten or fearful cat is described as calm by the handler. The cat is protecting themselves and no learning is happening. So often we hear folks say, well, I picked them up until they stopped struggling. So, they like it now. But really what's happening is the cat is giving up. They're just shutting down. They're going into protective mode, right? If I just don't do anything, eventually they'll put me down. So we don't have a calm, relaxed cat. We have a cat that has shut down to preserve itself, to protect itself, which are two very different things. Also, it's really important to kind of know that this doesn't generalize to other people and situations. It may work for one handler, but the cat or kitten will remain fearful with other handlers. It doesn't occur outside of the learning environment, making it short-lived and ineffective for improving adaptability. So let's say, I've kind of done this flooding technique with a kitten, and, he eventually comes around to me and allows me to do these things to him. Um, all he knows is that I'm the scary person. So he's allowing me to do these things because if he doesn't, then I'm going to do the scary things to him. When he comes back to the shelter for adoption or you introduce him to another person, that person is going to have to go through the same forced loving procedure um, ad infinitum until we've gotten kind of everybody involved to terrify the kitten to the point where we can interact with the kitten. It doesn't generalize. He's not going to come back to the shelter and be social. He's going to come back to the shelter and be terrified because that's his kind of base behavior, right? So at that point, then the people interacting with him can choose what path they're going to take to work with him, but he's certainly not then social with those people. So it's also emotionally damaging to the cat or kitten. It's breaking trust in a situation where trust is absolutely imperative. We want to build trust. We'll talk kind of about why we want to do that and what we actually get out of it by doing it a different way. But without trust, these behaviors aren't salient. They have to learn to trust people, not be afraid of them. Okay. So why do people do it? Why is it something that I certainly practice in? Because it appears to work quickly, right? The kitten shuts down, the cat shuts down. You've got a calm cat. So you think that you've made this amazing progress. And the more you do it, the more progress you're feeling like you're seeing. So it had, and in the sheltering world, we need things to happen quickly, right? We need to be able to move these guys through quickly. So this method can certainly appear to work quickly for us. But really, it's a lack of understanding regarding the process and its damaging effects. I mean, if someone had told me 10 years ago what I was doing to these guys, I would have stopped doing it, right? I didn't know that I was actually damaging their psyche, that I, wasn't actually helping them, I was hurting them. So none of us want to inflict harm on our, the animal that we're supposed to be building trust and supposed to be caring for, right? So it's as much as I kind of dislike this phrase, it's the know better, do better situation. Now we know better, so we can also do better. So the fear-free approach, are using desensitization and counter conditioning to help fearful cats and kittens. So there's this this approach, this fear-free approach that's out there in the sheltering world and the veterinary care world, that is kind of sweeping the world. And I'm only using that term because it really is, what we're talking about really is a fear-free, force-free approach. The dog training world is really leaning towards force-free training. And the cat world is trying to catch up. And there are some really great vet techs and lecturers out there talking about how to do this and why we should do it. And the cat world is a little bit slower to catch up. The kind of the processes that folks are used to using certainly appear to show results. And for whatever reason, we just can't kind of grasp onto the idea that cats can be trained the same way dogs can be trained. Yeah, it takes longer, they're more sensitive, they're quicker to kind of give up on training and move on to what they want to do. But they can absolutely be trained. And it's a very, very rewarding process. There's a lot of dog trainers out there that'll tell you, if you want to be a better dog trainer, go train a cat. And it's true. They are much more difficult to work with, but the process is such a bonding process that when I talk to adopters about doing it, just the process itself will increase the bond between the adopter and the cat, that it's worth doing. Just that bonding in itself is so important that it's worth doing. But systematic desensitization and counter conditioning are two common treatments for fears, anxiety, phobias, and aggression. Basically, any behavior problem that involves arousal or an emotional reaction. When the problem is rooted in how a dog or cat feels about a particular thing, it isn't enough to just teach them a different behavior. We often teach dogs, to sit in the presence of the thing that previously made them lunge or growl. What's most effective is a treatment that will change the way he feels about something. This treatment will eliminate the underlying reason for the behavior problem in the first place. So I guess in the dog scenario, a dog will often lunge and growl at other dogs, right? And we'll teach them to sit and pay attention to their handler in a way that, that way they're ignoring the dog that's passing them. And often with a dog, not often, but sometimes with a dog, that's the best we can get. And that's okay. But what we would prefer to do is desensitize them to being around other dogs, right? So they don't feel like they need to lunge and growl at other dogs. That's a much more effective way of working working through that fear and arousal, because that way they can be a better member of society, right? A safer member of society. So a happier member of society, right? So let's try and treat the cause and offer them solutions, offer them alternatives, let them make these decisions on their own, so that we're actually treating the fear, the phobia, the aggression, that kind of thing. Desensitization and counter conditioning are treatments that were developed by psychologists, usually done at the same time. These treatments are used to help both people and animals with fears and phobias. They're effective, but somewhat complex, right? We know that. For animals, they involve patient training several times a day, progressing in small, carefully planned increments. Because treatment must progress and change according to the pet's reactions, And because these reactions can be difficult to read and interpret, systematic desensitization and counter conditioning are most effective when the handler has a solid understanding of behavior and body language. That is really important. Their behavior and body language will inform how we're going to work with them. Okay, so it's really important that you know, if you've taken in a foster and maybe you're a new foster and don't know a ton about body language and behavior, do some research. I have some great resources I can share with you, but even just spending time with that cat, getting to know what their threshold is, understanding what their response is, so that you can avoid pushing them past that level of fear, is really important. And each cat is so different that even if you're a very seasoned foster parent, very seasoned with cats, this new foster cat could be dramatically different than the cat you had the last time. So we really want to spend some time getting to know them. Even if we're doing that while we're trying to work with them, that's really important work to do. So this is kind of the ABCs, right? Let's just start here. Getting started with your foster, we want to set up a safe room, always a safe room. They need to have a space that is theirs. If that space happens to be your bedroom and you sleep in there, that's fine. You're working with that cat, so that's fine. But if you have, a spare bedroom or a bathroom or someplace like that, we can set them up. That's preferable for your comfort. My foster room in my very small home has become my bedroom, which is, it can be difficult when you're working with a fearful cat to also then be going to bed in that room, because you can unintentionally flood that cat just by being in the room. So if you have a spare room, that is ideal. And these pictures are not maybe fantastic. I just wanted to show you some elements of what could be important, because the cats in these pictures are not really all that fearful. I'm going to be honest with you. This room here on the left, it has a very nice hiding space. It has a nice comfortable bed. There's a scratcher, there's toys, there's food, water, there's a litter box, all of the things that you might need. But this hiding space is kind of the most important thing. This is a bathroom. I love using bathrooms for fostering because it really limits where they can hide, but I can offer them a safe hiding place, which is incredibly important. And that hiding box is fantastic. It's not too big. But there's plenty of room for that cat to completely retreat, right? Which is very important. I really only included this middle picture here because it's a bathroom. Dog on my foot, because it's a bathroom. We love bathrooms. They've got the food and the water, the fantastic fluffy bed, a nice slow feeder. Any cats that are kind of gulping food, that slow feeder can really help with that. Neither of the cats in these two pictures look particularly shy. We've got lots of nice loose body language in those pictures, but that bathroom it appears really small, right? But we can offer that cat everything he needs in that bathroom. Obviously, there's no hiding space in that picture, but I'm sure there's something there. And then this last picture here on the right is actually a crate that's set up in my bedroom for a kitten. I don't think. Oh, he is in there. He's hiding behind the litter box. I had to modify the setup because he didn't want to go in his hidey bed. I had to make a little tent for him by tying a blanket to the sides of the crate. The back left side of the crate, I had to make a tent for him. He didn't want to go in the bed, so I had to give him a different hiding spot. So he had just come home and he's hiding behind the litter box. Obviously, that's not where I wanted him to be because that's not comfortable for him. So I made a tent for him. But this is an extra large dog crate with food, water, litter box, hiding space, and toys. It seems like it's really small, right? But for a kitten, it's perfect. So it really worked out quite nicely for him. So that's kind of where he started. He eventually had access to the room though. So we've also got kind of a list, the safe room. What do we want? For adults, we want something that's quiet and away from other animals. We obviously want their litter box. We want food, water, treats, wet food. We want comfort items, bedding, blankets, anything that is soft and fuzzy that they will find comfortable. They must have a hiding space. And a word about hiding spaces. A lot of folks use bedrooms. I have historically used bedrooms before my son was born. I had a fantastic foster room, but the downfall to a bedroom is that there's probably a bed in there. There's probably a dresser in there, right? There's places they can go under and get really far back that you can't get to. So What does that mean? What do I do? For those situations, I will find a box, any sort of cardboard box really, that I can kind of tape up and shove back there. And I'm going to shove them back far enough so that they can't really be moved. If I need to put something in the box, sometimes I'll put rocks. For some reason, I have a stack of bricks in my garage. I'll put bricks in a box. Anything that can keep those blocks from being displaced so that the cat then can hide behind the box. What we're not going to completely eliminate that hiding space, but we want to make sure that that cat is not so far removed from you that you can't do work with them. Okay. When I've got a dresser in my bedroom that is like 4 inches off the ground, I completely enclose that. I will tape cardboard around it so that nothing can get under there. And unfortunately, in my bedroom, I don't have closet doors, so I also have to block that area off with boxes. Actually, I use laundry baskets in the closets, but whatever works, guys. So we're not, like I said, removing a hiding space. We're still going to offer a hiding space. In my case, under a bed, I will offer them a box that has a hole in the front that I can still get to, that, I can still interact with a cat to some degree. I can still kind of see what the body language is telling me, but they're not, so far away from me that I can't get anywhere near them. Hey, I have a dog whining, I'm sorry. So that's the deal with hiding spaces. We offer them, they need to be from us. They need to be ones that we approve of, not necessarily ones that they approve of. Some cats will stay in their carrier the entire time they're with you, or, in the beginning, and that's fine. That's a fantastic hiding place. We love that as a hiding place because that smells like them, right? So that's a fantastic, safe hiding place. I really like cats that stay in their carrier. That's a very easy place to work with them too. So that's a good spot if they choose to stay there. But offer them the hiding place that you want in whatever way that you want to create that. But block off hiding spaces that make it impossible for you to get to them. Okay. I love having a TV, a radio, a white noise machine, anything in that room that creates some sort of noise blocker from the rest of the house initially. It's going to serve two purposes, actually. If you can have a TV or radio on in that room, that's getting them used to the sound of voices, right? And, at first, if they're too fearful for that, that's fine. But eventually we do need to desensitize them to sounds to some degree. So once you're seeing some level of confidence with them, get some sound in that room. Okay. Even if that's just during, the time that you're home, because, they're going to experience a routine in their new home, right? People are going to be home at some point. So, if we can expose them to sound to some degree in a way that makes sense to the routine of normal life, fantastic. I do use a white noise machine in the beginning so that I can, because I have dogs, I have other cats, I have a kid and stuff. So I want to block out some of that scary noise at first. The TV doesn't necessarily do that. I like the white noise machine a little bit better. I have an air conditioning unit in that room that also block out a lot of noise, but it does obviously make the room cold. So that's often turned off. But a white noise machine does it pretty nicely. Vertical space, if you can provide them with that, some cats aren't going to want it, and that's okay. But if you have a cat that prefers to go up and hide, and you've got a really nice cat tree or the shelter, so we get them at the shelter, sometimes we can provide you with, that's if you find that you have a cat that prefers to be in that vertical space, let's find a way to resolve that so they still have a hiding spot in that vertical space. A lot of these fearful guys really are what we call ground dwellers. I believe Jackson Galaxy calls them bush dwellers. They tend to want to be low and hidden, but occasionally you will find a fearful cat who really wants to go up. They're the vertical climbers. Sometimes those guys go in clean rooms and go in the ceiling. So we know those guys pretty well. So if you find yourself with one of those, just contact Anne. We can certainly try and find something that's safe for them to be in. Okay. Give them toys. They're probably not going to play with you at first, but they may come out at night and play because that's when they're feel safest, right? And that's beautiful. We don't want to take that away from them. We obviously want to provide them with any opportunity to engage in species-specific behaviors. So toys, all the toys, it's fine. We're not going to know what they want to play with at first, so just give them lots of toys and they'll figure it out on their own. I do like to provide a nightlight. It's very important that they have a consistent sense of day and night, because often these guys are going into bathrooms or bedrooms that don't have a lot of ambient lighting. So it's really important that we don't turn the lights out on them during the day. They really need to know what's day and night. But I like a night light because there are times I'll check on them at night. I might go in there and offer them some food or something. So a night light helps me to do that without turning the light on and scaring them, so I like a night light. And for kittens, it's the same. Quiet away from other animals. The difference is that they're going to need a crate potentially. If you're fostering a fearful kitten and they're going to a bedroom, I recommend having a crate always. It's just such a big space, and no matter how hard you try to kitten proof that space, you're going to lose them somewhere. It's just going to happen, and you've not done anything wrong. It just happens. So a crate, an extra large dog crate, is very important when you're fostering kittens. I do like to have a crate if possible, because sometimes an adult cat will feel comfortable going in there as their hiding space. And just like I love a carrier to work with a cat, I love having a crate to work with a cat because they're so confined in there. They feel safe. I've made them a little den, but I can also get to them to work with them. So a lot of folks will use an exercise pen, a dog exercise pen in their foster space. That's fine too. Keep in mind, kittens are going to climb out of there. Adult cats are going to climb out of there. So there's various ways you can keep that from happening by covering it with something. But kittens, for sure, an exercise pen is okay as long as you can confine them in there. If you need to, it just depends on the space you're using. Obviously, litter box, food, water, treats, wet food, all that kind of stuff. They're comfort items, hiding spaces, just as we talked about before. The TV, radio, and white noise, toys. They absolutely need toys because they are going to play at night. I promise you, they're going to play at night. Give them a couple of nights, they're going to be out playing. That's the first sign that they've started to settle in. So, and a nightlight for those guys too. So we're going to use desensitization and counter conditioning with cats to help them with fear. How are we going to do that? It's going to start the same pretty much for all cats, but it's going to vary wildly based on their response to this treatment. So, excuse me. What we're going to do is create a routine of visits that works with your schedule. This doesn't have to change everything in your home. In fact, I don't want it to. As this work is hard, and I want you to be able to live your life as much as possible. So we're going to create a routine of visits that works with your schedule. Okay. And really what it means, we're going to do many short visits. You can overstay your welcome with these guys. If you stay too long, it can kind of transition to flooding, because this scary thing has been sitting a foot from me for 3 hours, and now I'm just utterly terrified and I can't move and I don't know what to do, and they won't leave. So we're gonna focus on many short visits, okay? That's where it's all gonna start. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna enter that room. Right, we're going to enter the room. We're going to, as best we can, assess the body language of our cat or kitten. And we're going to offer them some food, some high value food motivator. And I do have kind of a list of those. We'll talk a little bit about that a little later on. We're going to offer them some food that may be in a bowl, that may be on a spoon, that might be on a tongue depressor, whatever method of delivery feels like it's going to work. Let's do that. One word about this though, please don't feed them off your hands. I know there's this theory out there that if you do it from your hand, they know it's coming from you, and you're building this amazing bond, but they're going to know it's coming from you no matter what. They're scared of you and you're there with food. It doesn't matter where it's coming from. They know that it's coming from you. The big scary thing is giving me food. It doesn't need to be on your hand. I will tell you why. It may not have ever happened to you. And I know lots of people continue to do this, and that's fine, I guess, but bites happen, guys. Kittens have very sharp teeth. They can't help themselves when they bite, when they eat. Adult cats certainly can't help themselves when they eat. When they're hungry and they eat. I don't want your hand under that food, okay? The delivery method is not as important as it's kind of been led to believe, okay? The delivery method can be any of these other methods. Let's keep our phalanges safe. Okay, just my little spiel on that. We're gonna offer this food. A number of things can happen when we offer the food, but we're just gonna offer this food. So say we enter the room and we get within a foot of the cat and we see that the cat may have appeared to be slightly comfortable when we entered the room. Perhaps their legs were out to some degree, or, they were napping and they were comfortable in sleeping, and we enter the room and they maintain that body language, and we kind of move closer to them slowly, right? And then eventually they kind of tense up and they, get the wide eye and they start staring at us again. Take a step back, leave that food and leave the room. That's fine. You're done. Um, and we will talk a little bit about being their source of food. We'll talk a little bit about that. But generally and typically, your first visit is going to look like that. You kind of go in and that happens. And that's okay. That's what first visits look like. So we've done a few visits like this. Cats allowing us in the room, which is great. We're leaving food for them and we're taking off. We're going to keep doing this. Eventually, we enter the room and the cat lets us get within an arm's reach of him without tensing up or trying to move away or fleeing or any of these body language signals that we've kind of talked about. And at that point, we can offer our hand. And everyone kind of does things differently. I heard someone say not too long ago that offering a finger simulates how cats greet one another with their noses. So I kind of switched to the finger a few years ago, and I think it might be true. They seem much less threatened by this little finger than they do me offering an open hand. And it's actually true of dogs too. Just a little aside, dogs are often less fearful of something small approaching them than this big open hand. So I offer a finger, and I urge people to try that, even if you have another method you like better. Just try it. Trust me. These fearful guys, for whatever reason, are less afraid of this little finger than they are my giant hand. So this little note on that. Try and introduce yourself with your finger. Most likely the first introduction is going to go like this, with the cat moving away and becoming tense and all those kind of signals we've become used to. And so that's fine. Take a step back, leave them the food, leave the room. But really what we're doing is pairing our approach with this food, right? We're going to keep their fear as below threshold as possible. Think of their threshold as the line they can't cross. If they move away, let them move away. Always assess their body language. Approach them to the side, just like you would a fearful dog, right? Cats and dogs have very similar fear responses. Approach to the side, guys. It's going to be better that way. Avoid eye contact with them. Have consistent, predictable movements when you're with them. The more they feel that your approach is not threatening, the more open they're going to be to working with you. And the more consistent and predictable you are with your movements, the more they're going to open up to working with you, which is difficult for me because I'm a super clumsy person. I'll often enter a room and just trip over a bunch of stuff and make a bunch of noise. So I've got that to overcome. And perhaps there are other people out there who have that as well. But so there's a number of kind of ways you can go with this. So at first, we're just going to kind of enter the room, offer some food and leave. We're going to keep doing this and keep doing this. And eventually we're going to try and introduce ourselves, and we're going to keep trying that. We're going to keep trying that. We're going to be taking steps back as the cat is fearful with us. But eventually you're going to see that you enter the room, the cat allows you within a certain distance of them. You're going to know what that distance is. And you're at that point, just stay and offer them food. If that means that you kind of push a bowl of food towards them and you sit there for a little while, 20 minutes, talking to them, see if, you get any response. See if they loosen their body, see if they show any interest in coming out. If we're like on day 4 and we can get in the room without eliciting a strong fear response, an avoidant response, just hang out with them for a few minutes. You can read part of a book to them, sing a song to them, sing a whole album to them. See if, so we've elicited the fear response. Let's see if staying there with this food can help them relax. And if they relax, stay there, offer food, move in a little bit closer, see how close we can get. These are baby steps. This is all about baby steps. So, you may go in one day and offer food and the cat's completely tense and terrified of you. The next day we're getting a little bit closer. The next day we're moving in a little bit closer. And then the day after that, where we were the day before is eliciting a fear response, we have to take a step back. You never know kind of what fearful things have happened while you're not there. Maybe they heard a noise. Maybe you vacuumed the rest of the house and that has set them back. We have to be prepared for back and forth with these guys. So kind of off track, I'm sorry. But so, if you don't see a loosening of behavior with them, then it's fine. Just leave the food for them again and exit the room. It's all these baby steps, and we'll kind of go through this again. But this is the very simple basis of this process. We go in with food, we watch the body language, we move in closer and closer as they allow us to do that, and eventually introduce ourselves. And then we'll progress from there, which we'll talk about. But I do want to kind of touch on this point here in the beginning. When are toys appropriate? Toys are appropriate when the cat's not scared of them. And that doesn't mean the cat's playing with toys at night, so I'm going to play with toys with the cat, even if they're terrified of them. What that means is if you wave a wand toy in front of your fearful or feral kitten or fearful cat or whatever, and they, we see all the fear and stress signals appear, they're not ready to play. However, this happens a lot with kittens where they're more than, happy to engage and play with you, but you certainly cannot touch them. And that's beautiful. That's a great thing. Let's use that to bond with this kitten, because then we don't necessarily have to use as much food to motivate them as we can play. And that's what every adopter wants to do, right? They don't want to work with their kitten with food. They want to play with them. So it happens often with kittens where you can enter the room and get close enough to them to play with them. They're going to allow that. And they're not afraid of the wand toy that you're waving at them. So absolutely utilize those toys with those guys. But if you see any fear response from interacting with them with a toy, it's not time. They're not ready for that. So this is kind of a little more in depth of what we just talked about. Where do we start? Perhaps that slide is out of order. I'm not sure, but so where do we start? We're going to take the cat into their safe space. We're going to set the carrier down. We're going to open the carrier. The room is already all set up. Food, water, litter box, everything is all set up. You don't need to do anything other than set the carrier down and open it. Let them come out. Let them stay in. Whatever they want to do, you're going to leave the room. That's it. That's your first day. And that's fine. You're more than welcome to check on that cat later in the day, at night, whatever you need to do before you go to bed. But we're not going to do anything with them that first day. Okay. We're going to make sure that they have everything they need, all of their comfort items, everything, and that carrier remains in their space open. And then we're going to kind of go. Okay. That's the first day. So when we're ready to start working the next day, we're going to kind of what I touched on in the last slide, we're going to go into the room. We're going to kind of assess what the cat is doing, where they are. Let's kind of locate them before we do much more. And we're just going to kind of sit there. Let's say you enter the room and the cat is in their hiding space that you provided them under or near the bed. You can see them there. It's really cool if you're able to position that hiding space so that you can see into it easily. That would be the ideal situation. But you enter the room, you see that the cat is there. You probably can't really see the body language they're throwing at you from the entry of the room, right? And that's okay. You move into the room and, keeping an eye on the cat as best you can. We move in, we're moving as close to the cat as we can to kind of see what they're doing. Most likely they're going to be pretty tense in that spot, wherever they are. So back off, to the door, whatever feels the furthest away you can get from them, and just hang out with them for a bit. Sing, talk, read to them. We're going to go in there with that food like I talked about. We're not necessarily going to move into their space too much. It gets a little tricky with these guys because I'm asking you to move in and assess their body language, right? Especially in the beginning, we're going to try and get to know who they are. So this is when I'll kind of move in, talking very quietly, moving very slowly. I'm going to set a bowl of wet food down for them. I'm going to kind of check them out, see what they're doing, and then I'm going to move away. Okay. I'm going to move away. I'm going to sit, I'm going to talk. I read to them. I love to sing, but no one wants to hear that. So I'll talk to them. I'll read to them. More than likely that cat's not going to eat anything, nothing at all. And so in most cases in the beginning, I'm going to leave that food for them to eat because they'll eat when I'm not there. There's this fantastic idea of being their food source if you can. My concern often with adult cats specifically is that they're not going to eat well until they're comfortable. So I am not necessarily going to be the only source of wet food they get. And I'll kind of explain what that means. I am going to, those first few days, move in, assess body language, set my food down, move away, talk, sing, read, whatever for 20 minutes, half an hour, and exit the room. Um, it's a little different with kittens. As long as it's kind of indicated by our vet team that it's okay, I will be the source of their wet food. I am always going to leave dry food out because we really need to make sure these guys are eating well, right? And we can establish a routine of feeding once we know what their eating routines are like, once we know they're eating well, those kinds of things. But with adult cats in the first few days, for sure, I am not going to be their source of food. I need to make sure they're getting what they need. And wet food, very stinky, high value wet food, can be a source of comfort for them. So I'm going to leave it for them no matter what. With kittens, though, I am always their source of wet food, meaning the only way they get wet food is if they take it from me. And that's not, so my fostering is a little different because I tend to do kittens that are big enough for adoption, right? When you've got a kitten that's just over a pound and is hissing and spitting at you, you're absolutely going to want to check in with Anne or our foster team to find out if you can do this. I'm going to, as kind of someone who's on the other side of it, working with them behaviorally and has kind of this fear of cats and kittens not eating. I don't have the medical degree to kind of back up any of my claims. When we've got little tiny kittens or adult cats who just aren't eating well, I would kind of hesitate to be their food source until we know that they're gaining weight appropriately, that they are eating the way we want them to eat. However, if you've got a kitten that's like a pound and a half or even approaching 2 pounds, happens a lot. Those guys go to foster. And you have seen that they're eating well, you've had them for a day or two and you've seen that they're eating well. At that point, I would remove wet food from their daily life, meaning it's not something you leave out for them all the time. And you are the only way they get wet food. That raises the stakes for them. It's something they really want. You have it, so you can build a bond with them a lot faster that way. I feel like that got kind of convoluted. I'm sorry. Bottom line is, for me personally, when I have an adult cat who's not eating well or very small kittens, I'm very cautious about being their food source. When I have older kittens who have a history of eating well, I will be their food source. And you can establish that after a few days with them. And you can certainly reach out to Anne and she'll confirm whether or not that's something you can do, removing their wet food and just being their source of wet food. But I'm a little bit cautious with adult cats for sure and little teeny kittens. But the vets and Anne can certainly okay that. Just don't take my word for it because I'm just the cat lady. So, but toys can be a motivator, as we talked about earlier. Just watch for that fear response. In the first few days, you're not going to be, waving a wand toy in front of your cat or kitten. You're just getting to know them. You're finding out what their body language looks like. They're not coming out for you. Probably they're not ready for you to wave a wand toy in front of them. But a few days in, let's definitely give it a try. It's definitely not going to hurt them to try a wand toy or some, balls or whatever with them. We're not going to permanently damage them by offering them something that scares them. Just don't do it again. Just back off and try it again later. Okay. In the beginning, I want you to keep visits from other people to a minimum. I guess it's hard because, we want to socialize them to other people and even to kids. But in those first few days, we're letting them get to know their space. We're letting them find some confidence with their primary caregiver so that you really have a sense of who they are and you really have a sense of progress. So you know what their body language started out like, where the body language is headed, and you can kind of direct and inform the next people that go into work with them. Okay. So we want a few days where you are the primary caregiver. That's important because we need someone who has a baseline of behavior and response. That's really important. Okay. Obviously keep them separate from other pets at first. They can't handle the stress of that, guys. There is definitely a point at which we can introduce a helper cat. I would be hesitant with helper dogs. kind of overall, it would be rare for me to say, yeah, introduce your dog to that cat. But if we'll talk a little bit about helper cats and how that works. And really, in the first few days, and even moving forward, the most important thing is we are only touching them when they ask us to touch them. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But certainly in the first few days, I doubt you're going to see too many of these guys saying, yes, please, I would like to be petted now. So moving forward, so here's, we've done this work, right? We have gone in multiple times a day as works with our schedule and offered food and monitored body language and made our presence known and kind of done all of these things. So when should I offer my hand? When should I attempt to pet this cat? Really, it's up to them, guys. I always recommend taking little baby steps. Like we're very aware of the body language. We're very aware of what they're letting us do. And we're just moving closer and closer and closer to this cat, sitting and talking to them and reading to them until finally we're kind of in their space. And you can increase those stays as the cat allows it. You can increase, decrease the distance between you as the cat allows it. What we're looking for is a reduction in their fear response. And that reduction can be so minuscule. It can be so subtle that you can miss it. So I don't want you to spend a week sitting at the door talking to your foster cat. Unless, of course, you move in and that cat becomes defensive. That's a whole other thing, right? We know we have to take a huge step back if that's happening. But it's okay to move in closer and closer and closer to your foster cat or kitten, even knowing that the body language hasn't changed a lot. It's entirely possible that we are missing subtle differences, especially, you've had your cat for 4 days and you're hearing that cat coming out at night and playing, and you know that cat's eating well at night. They're coming out, they feel comfortable at night. Maybe today you move 2 feet closer to them than you were at yesterday, just to kind of see, let's gauge what happens when I do that. Perhaps the cat is tense when I move in, but I spend 20 minutes sitting there reading to them, and they loosen while I'm doing it. Those little kind of minuscule pushes, that's where, we're taking a huge step back from forced loving, right? Because we're not forcing them to interact with us, but a little bit of push here and there is okay. You're not harming them. You're not harming the relationship. They know that you're there, that you're non-threatening. They understand that. It is okay to take those steps forward. When we talk about flooding, what I'm asking you to not do is to grab them and hold them until they stop doing the fearful thing that they're doing. So eventually we're going to have to move into their space so that we can try and feed them from that spoon or tongue depressor, or offer them a bowl of food and hope that they eat it while we're there. We're going to have to keep taking those steps forward, right? So it seems counterintuitive, right? I asked you not to do this forced loving thing, but now I'm telling you, you're kind of gonna have to do this forced loving thing. It is a different thing altogether. We can't make any progress without kind of seeing where we can go next, right? So, it's not uncommon for me to daily go in and move in closer and closer just to kind of see where that threshold has the threshold moved. Can I get closer to you today? If I sit closer to you today and you remain tense, perhaps will you calm a bit? Will you loosen a bit while I'm there? And that will inform what my next step is, right? If, I move closer and that cat becomes completely avoidant and tries to flee, I've moved too fast. I need to take a step back. If I move in closer and that cat kind of remains tense, kind of watchful of me, but shows some interest in that bowl of food, then heck yeah, I'm moving in closer. We're gonna spend 20 minutes with me sitting here reading instead of back there reading, right? It's all about making minuscule changes so that we're not pushing them to the point where they feel they have to be defensive, or they feel they have to flee, or they're learning, that if I bite this person, they'll stop doing this thing, right? This whole idea of desensitization comes by being there and offering this thing that can be rewarding for them. Okay, so how do I know when to move forward? As far as, we obviously want to be able to touch them at some point. When your foster cat begins to approach you or just stops running away. Um, it'll happen a lot where you enter your foster room and the cat is actually out. Um, and you can kind of take one of two steps here. A lot of folks will offer play in those moments because that's such a natural cat behavior. I like that. I like kind of offering a wand toy if you catch them, in the middle of the room. See if that, because they're moving into their space to offer them food could be too scary. So let's offer a moment of play, see if that does anything. If they run away, they run away. But the fact that they were out during the day while they know you're there is huge, right? So let's build on that, guys. But so let's say you've moved your body closer and closer to your foster cat in their hiding space, and now we're within an arm's reach and we're feeding you from a spoon. Let's, at this point, try the finger introduction. And the hope is that you've done this slowly enough and carefully enough that that cat perhaps leans out. What is that? I should inspect that. That's huge, right? That's a big deal. Let's make sure we're rewarding for that. That's a huge deal. So if we offer the finger and they do this kind of leaning in thing, let's see what happens if I scratch you here or on your forehead or on your chin. Let's try that, and let's pair it with a super good reward, right? Let's keep those two things together. If they allow a face scratch, can I touch the rest of you? Let's see. And again, we're pairing it with this food reward the whole time. So it's these kind of torturous baby steps moving closer to them, and that takes however long that takes. And you can do that based on your understanding of your cat's body language. If you feel that we're not progressing too fast, if you feel that you can get into that cat space within a couple of days, within a week, fantastic. Let's test the waters by introducing ourselves to them and hope that we see some progress there. And that's kind of it's really what it looks like. And each cat is going to tell you how much time they need with their body language. Okay. Excuse me. But in theory, we can work all the way up to being held. With kittens specifically, I would like to work to that point. Okay. It's not necessary with adult cats, but if you've gotten yourself to the point with your foster cat where you feel like you can pick them up, we'll talk a little bit about how we can do that. Enjoying carrier is something we can always work towards. That carrier can always be open in their space. You can have a towel or blanket in there that smells like them. You can offer them treats and food in there all the time. That desensitizes them to the carrier, right? In fact, I encourage that for all fosters at all times. Keep that carrier in their space, keep it open, keep treats in there, keep catnip in there, something in there that encourages them to be in there, because that's not only going to make it easier for you when they need to come see the vet or need to go back to the shelter. Obviously, it's going to make it easier for the adopter, right? So keep that carrier in there. Nail trims are a whole other thing. We can talk about that with kittens. I don't really recommend it with adult cats unless that adult cat is incredibly comfortable with you, and that's a whole other talk. But it can be done. We can work them up to that. If you've gotten to that point with your foster cat, we can absolutely talk about that. But anyway, all of it is done by pairing a positive reinforcer with the event in slow increments. Just as I said, moving in bit by bit by bit by bit with our wet food. Either we're leaving the wet food or we are able to become the source of food for that cat, which does definitely push them a little bit faster to interact because they want the wet food, guys. Until the point where we're sitting near them, we're offering our finger, we're offering our hand. I like the finger though, and petting them, scratching them. Continue pairing that with a food reward. Hopefully we get to the point where we can pet them all over. Hopefully they gain confidence to the point where they will play with us. These are the things we're really looking for, okay? But always keep them under threshold. Any sign of discomfort or moving away means stop. And that basically, if you're in this baby steps process of moving closer and closer to your foster cat, offering them wet food, they may ask you to stop, right? They may move away. They may shift and be ready to flee or whatever. What I encourage, if you've had that cat long enough and feel comfortable enough, take a step back for sure, but hang out there with them. You can see if perhaps they can relax with you having moved away. Okay, let's not. It's really important in the first few days that you get to know them pretty well, get to know their body language, get to know what their fear response is. so that we can take bigger leaps with them. And so that we can know when we've pushed them too far, if we take a step back, are we recovering? Can the cat recover from that and go back to a calmer state of mind? Let's see. Let's give it a try. Okay. Don't just leave the room because the cat has shown a sign of discomfort. If you're days or even weeks into working with them, that's the point at which we take a step back, see if the cat can recover from it, and then stay where we are. That's our line for today. Okay. It really is one step at a time. You may need to work on offering your hand for a while, or take a step backwards. You may need to work on offering food for a while. Or take a step backwards. Generally, in the food offering phase, you're not taking too many steps backward. You're really trying to get to know the cat and move forward as much as possible. But if you've moved on to the offering of the finger, there will be some baby steps moving backwards. If you're moving on to working with a kitten to pick it up, absolutely there will be baby steps. If you're working towards working with toys, there will absolutely be baby steps backwards. It's going to happen. But this kind of baseline work that you're doing in the beginning is so important because you can then understand where the threshold is. You can know when you have pushed them too far. You can know when you need to take a step back because you've gotten to know what their fear signals look like. Okay. So specific to kittens, and I'm not going to talk too much about working towards picking cats up because it's so nuanced. We don't know what their history is being picked up. We certainly don't know what their fear response is to being picked up. It is something that we can work on once we have built confidence with a cat, but it's not necessary for an adopter necessarily. I would love to get to that point, but with these guys, what I really need is for them to build confidence with people more than anything else. So, but specific to kittens, it would be awesome if we can get them to the point where we can try and pick them up. So that's not going to happen until they let you pet them. You're going to do all these little baby steps. I've fed them. I've moved into their space. I've offered the finger. I can pet them. They respond to that. So now I've got a kitten that responds not only probably to food and toys at this point. Generally, if they're sticking around in your area long enough for you to pet them, they've become responsive enough to toys and food. But so we've worked up to this kitten and he's finally hanging around, and I feel confident that today's the day I'm going to try and pick him up. So you're going to just drape a little hand towel over that kitten, and with two hands, just pick him up. You want to support him, make him feel safe and cocooned, just like this little guy is in this picture. If they struggle, put him down. What they're telling you is that I'm terrified. I don't want to be picked up. You must put me down. And I know we talked a bit about, the struggle, and they learn to struggle, and then they've learned that they should do that when they're picked up. But in this instance, it will be instantaneous. Kitten struggles, they put you down. It's not really a learning moment. It's just an oops moment, really, right? But if you can pick them up and they, remain loose or comfortable with that, we're going to pair it with a food reward. Pair it with a food reward. Just feed them full of wet food. But also, that being said, if they do struggle, reward them after you put them down so that we're not ending on a bad note. Anytime you have like an incident happen, and it will happen, reward them. I know it's counterintuitive, right? I'm rewarding them for this bad behavior, but what you're really telling them is that they're not in trouble and everything's okay. So it is okay to reward a cat after a bad experience, because we don't want to end on a bad note. We want to still be friends, right? So reward. But if you get to the point of picking them up, wrap them up in that towel. If they let you do it, just give them lots of wet food while you're holding them, and you can pet them, scratch around the ears and stuff, see if you can get a nice loose affiliative response, purring and that kind of thing. You're golden if you've gotten to that point. That's perfect. And you can continue to work on that with them, because one of the biggest thing an adopter wants from a kitten is to be able to pick them up, guys. So it's not a necessary thing for adoption, but if we can get to that point with them, that's fantastic. So, but that's my handy method of working to pick them up. Wrap in a towel, pair with a food reward, put them down if they struggle. And just keep trying until you get to the point where you're able to reward them while you're holding them. And often that just leads to purring and that kind of stuff. So what are we rewarding here? If you're close enough to the cat to see what's going on with them, I really encourage you to reward anything. We're rewarding them for eye contact. You know, if they have been, their gaze has been averted and they make eye contact with you, reward them for that. And really, when I'm kind of, this whole slide is based on the theory that you have become their food source. I should have definitely have made that more clear. So if you have become their food source, if you've gotten to that point where they're eating well and everything's cool and you can be their food source, we're going to reward them for this eye contact, nice, loose, soft eye contact, any body loosening at all, guys, anything that even approximates a loosening body, reward them for that. Any forward movement, obviously reward them for that. Even the slightest, nudge forward, reward them for that. Any interest in play, which you can reward them with play if that's not scary for them, or a fantastic food motivator, because play is a big part of what an adopter will want. Allowing touch, even if they retreat at any point, reward, big rewards for allowing touch. Allowing being picked up, obviously that is paired completely with a food motivator. So, but anything that shows any interest in engaging or lessening of fear, anything, guys. And because you will put all this kind of footwork into getting to know them over the first few days, weeks, depending on how they're doing, you will know when their fear is lessening. So just reward anything that to you seems like is a step forward. Okay. When we're still kind of in the early stages and we haven't been able to become their source of food, they're just being rewarded for allowing you in their space, for allowing you to be in the room with them, okay, or leaving that food for them. So what is a motivator? A motivator is anything that makes the cat work for you, anything. And I say that not as a vet, but as someone who does the work with the cats. So again, there are definitely going to be instances where some of this is flat no, okay? And you're gonna wanna check with Anne or our foster team to really know if it's okay to use some of these things, because some of these guys will have diarrhea and that kind of thing. We don't wanna upset their GI tract any more than it already is. But always start with stinky wet food. The stinkier, the better. Anything that is fish flavored or scented, that's a good place to start. Anne definitely has a bunch of cool wet food up her sleeve that she can share with you. There's a couple of brands out there that are more effective than others. And I think Anne usually has a supply of those, but stinky wet food, and it's gotta be food that they will eat, guys. So part of the beginning process, right, the getting to know you process, it involves leaving wet food out for them. And part of the reason I encourage you to leave it out for them and leave the room is to find out if they'll eat it. They may just not be eating initially, but eventually they'll probably start to eat this wet food motivator that you're leaving for them. And you will want to kind of switch it up to see what kinds they like. So, you leave that bowl in the morning, it's completely empty. You know that that's a food you can work with. Okay. If that makes sense. If they haven't eaten it at all and they have eaten all their dry food, you know that wet food is not something they like. So, obviously we're going to try something else. And we always have a wide variety of wet food you can try at the shelter. Tuna is usually a good way to go. Even if they don't like the tuna itself, they like the juice that comes with the tuna. We use baby food a lot. The meat kind, no, it can't be mixed with vegetables. We only use the meat kind, okay? And all cats are different. They do not all like it. Any of these things. Cats are so picky. Who knew? I will often use, this is where the list gets a little tricky, guys. I will often use cream cheese, whipped cream, spray cheese, lunch meat, bacon bits. If the cat will eat it, I'll use it. And it's a lot of trial and error to find out what the cat will like and will work for. But again, we're really watching their diets. You may need a vet approval for some of the higher value food motivators. If you have a cat that will not eat any wet food or anything other than their dry food, then we need to be in contact with Anne, with Dr. Julie, to kind of find out what we can try outside the realm of normal, because we need something that they will work for. Okay. It's important. It's all based on food. So I just wanted to show you some visits with kittens and stuff that I was doing, have filmed at the shelter. If it will play. Oops. Sorry, guys. Hang on. Sometimes they don't like to play. Let's see what we got going on here. 1 second. I'm going to run through these real fast and see if. Yeah, I was worried about this happening. Okay, one sec. Let me get out of here real fast and we will run to YouTube real fast. Here we go. It's the first technical difficulty. That's good. That's not bad, huh? Let me move myself. There's so much happening on YouTube. Okay, let's see what we have here. We're gonna start with this one, guys. So this was a visit with some kittens at the shelter, and I'd been working with them for a while. So they're familiar with me. I've been working with them for a while, so I feel comfortable offering, you know, a hand to them. And he kind of leaned forward a little bit, but he's not trusting me, right? And the guy below him doesn't trust me at all. So he leaned forward a little bit to my finger, so I decided to try and pet him. This little guy says, "No, don't pet me. Get away from me, lady. Get away." Not much happening, but I'm going to offer some food in a second to these guys. Let's see what he does. He's curious of the food. That's cool. We're good there. He's not sure he feels trusting enough to eat from me. Oh, but he does, and he starts eating, right? So this was after a couple of weeks of work with these guys, to be honest. It took me a while to get to this point with them. They were obviously older, unsocial kittens, so it was took us a while to get to this point with them. And now I'm gonna see what happens with this little guy. He's very tense. He doesn't want to eat from me, but then he does show some interest, right? I didn't back away at first because I had spent a lot of time working with them and I knew what his threshold was. He's a little bit curious, but he's not sure he wants to eat from me. So I decided to put it in his bowl because I knew that he would eat from his bowl. And I offer him his bowl. And that's okay. Sometimes that's where we go with these guys. That's totally okay.
Take this back and get you some more food, okay?
So I'm just gonna kind of let them eat. I'm not really gonna do much with them. This little guy is much more comfortable with me being in his space, so that's fantastic. He stole it. Sometimes it happens with kittens. They steal it. And I made a lot of noise. See, there was the clumsy Jess thing happening. I made a lot of noise on the cage door. So really, this is what things look like. I'm just feeding them. I'm really just feeding them. I'm not sure if in this video, I think I probably try to pet them again, probably, because things are going pretty well. Yep, there it is. I'm going to try and pet him again. And this time he's a little more curious, right? He's a little more loose. But then it occurred to me he just wanted the food. So I moved away a little bit. And he showed a little bit of curiosity, but the second I touched him, he became avoidant. So I stopped petting him. So these guys did get adopted. Oops, let's pause this. Those guys did get adopted pretty quickly, thankfully. But they came with 2 other kittens that were a lot more work for us. Let's see. This one looks like it wants to play, which is good because I like this one a lot. So this guy I've been working with forever, you guys, forever. I think, oh no, it doesn't want to play. Hang on, let's see what I can do here. Yeah, okay, let's go back really fast. We're running out of time. Let me go back really fast to, oops, let me find that video. So this little guy, I've got a couple of videos of kittens that are kind of interesting. Where is that? This guy, let's look at this guy. So I've been working with this guy forever. Let me back that up a little bit. So I approach, he's avoidant at first, but I know him pretty well. I've been working with him for a while, so I go back in pretty quickly and try again. He's curious. he's smelling my hand. So I try again. And the second attempt, he leans in and starts purring. It's important to kind of look at that because I've been working with him for a while. I knew what his threshold was, and I knew that I could push him just a little bit without absolutely losing my bond with him. And I'd been working with him with food forever. So you definitely see in the first approach, he's like, ah. But I knew him well enough to know that if I gave him a second to recover and went back in, I might get a different response. Now, if I had gone back in and he had been avoidant again, I would have definitely stopped. I wouldn't have continued to try and pet him. I would have stopped at that point. Looks like these videos are going to give us a hard time. So let's see. That's the video we already watched. That's the one we watched. So I missed out on a couple of videos. I'm sorry about that, guys. But I can certainly offer more resources for that for anyone that wants to. I have a lot of videos of working with fearful cats, so I can certainly offer videos for that. But as usual, I'm going over. So, so as far as play therapy and other pets, so we've talked a bit about this already, right? We're only going to use toys if they don't scare them. But I love a wand toy because it's great when you need distance. If you've got a kitten or cat that will engage with a wand toy specifically, you can be a couple feet away from them and still be engaged and still engaging with them, which is fantastic, right? It engages all their senses and allows for all of their natural behaviors, which is ideal. It's the perfect situation. We can pair them with food motivators. If I've got a kitten that's showing interest in a toy, but if I move it, it scares them, I'll often offer them some treats in that moment with the toy there to kind of desensitize them to the toy being there at all. And then we'll just keep going from there. See if we can work up to the kitten not being afraid of the toy moving at that point. So as usual, we're only touching them if they solicit interaction. You saw with in that second video, that little kitten, he certainly wasn't soliciting attention at first. But with that second approach with him, he allowed attention, he solicited attention, he purred, he made muffins, all that kind of stuff. So that's the only time I'm touching them. And we're going to try all types of toys. Wand toys are ideal, mice that you can throw or roll or toss. Anything that rolls or crinkles. Cats love those crinkly mylar balls, kittens especially, so those can be fun to play with them with. And sometimes we can use a social helper cat to help with a fearful cat. Again, I don't really recommend dogs all that often. Adult cats especially have a lot of fears built up around dogs, predator and prey. So we don't use dogs often. But if you've got a cat in your home that is very cat social and is very people social, it's always worth trying that cat with your cat or kittens. You may want to check in with Anne or the vet team to the foster team to see if that's okay based on your foster's medical needs. But if you've got that cat in your home, it's wonderful. It can be wonderful for your foster cat if they are also open to being around other cats. A fearful cat learns faster from another cat than it does from a person, which is why when we've got two fearful cats together, it's a lot of work for a foster parent, or a litter of fearful kittens, it's a lot of work. They're learning fearful behavior from each other. So if we've got a social cat, we can kind of throw into that mix. Your fearful foster sees this cat being social with you, and they understand cats, right? So they can learn to respond to you the same way your social cat does. There's so many variables here, though. We really need to make sure that your foster cat or kitten is open to meeting this cat. We need to make sure that your resident cat is safe medically and that your resident cat is okay with your foster cat or kitten, because just like people, cats don't all like each other. So it would be a super, super slow introduction, and you want to be very aware of both the foster cat and your resident cat's response. And I've got tons of information on how to do that if you find yourself at that point, okay? You want to encourage play between the cats. You want to reward both cats for positive interactions. Play is really important with another cat with you on the other end of that play, because that is another bonding experience. Your fearful cat's learning this awesome play moment with you and with this cat. So it's fantastic. If you've got a social cat in your home and you've gotten to a point where you feel like you can introduce them, reach out to us and we'll let you know how best to make that happen, okay? We love helper cats. They're fantastic. So introducing new stimuli, we're only going to do that once the cat is comfortable with you, meaning not necessarily that they're coming out and approaching you, but they've gotten used to you and you have a baseline for their behavior. Okay. Um, Once you know where their threshold is and you know when you've gone too far, that's when you can start introducing new people. But what's really important is that it's done slowly and at their pace, the same way you did it. Okay. It's really, really important that whoever you're introducing to your cat takes the same steps that you did. Okay. You can introduce other people, potentially other pets like cats, like we just talked about. Kids are great, but we want to take special caution with kids, mostly because no matter how hard they try, they're not as quiet as we are, and they certainly don't move the same way we do. They're just not, fundamentally capable of controlling their movements the way we are. And those things, the noise and the movement, can be more fearful for your foster cat than anything else. It's not that kids just can't be with them; it's that kids literally cannot control themselves the way your foster cat may need them to. Okay. That being said, one of the best things for a fearful kitten is having a child work with them and handle them appropriately. That noise, that kind of unpredictability, once you've gotten your fearful cat or kitten to the point where you can introduce them to your kids, it can be instrumental in getting them up for adoption. And really, when we talk about generalizing behaviors, man, if you have a foster cat or kitten that is responsive to your children, roll with it, because that once they're okay with kids, they're pretty much okay with everyone. That kids are rough with fearful cats and kittens. I don't mean like physically rough, but fearful cats and kittens really are terrified of kids. So if we can get them to the point where they're comfortable with your kids, that's perfect. That is just wonderful. But it is all very, very important that everyone who meets them follows those same steps that we took to get that cat to the point of meeting them. Okay. We can't all of a sudden switch the game up on them. There has to be a food motivator. There has to be play therapy if you're at that point with them. We can't change the game. That will set them back. It will make it, we're taking a huge step back because now they don't know what to expect again. Okay. Adult cats can potentially be given access to your home. Each cat is different. It depends on your home. It depends on the cat, but that definitely doesn't happen until they're confident enough to approach you when you enter the room, and it's done slowly. We're not just going to open the door and say, have the house. It's great. It's done slowly. Okay. And once you're at that point, again, we can certainly guide you on how to do that. I'm not super comfortable with kittens being accessed to the home. Mainly because kittens just disappear on you. And their fear response is so strong that they may seem okay in the bedroom and you open the door and they just disappear and they're really hard to find, and they can be pretty wily once they're loose in the house. So they would need to be super confident with you to be given access to the home. They need to be confident enough to manage new stimuli with a positive response. So, and consistently, like, your kids come in the room and they come running towards your kids. Cool. Let's give them some more space to go. Okay. Although probably by that point they're ready for adoption, but what we really need to see is for that cat or kitten to consistently be approaching whoever's entering the room to have access to the home. Okay. So your cheat sheet, kind of, it's a lot of information. You want to set up the environment. You want to start small and work up. Do one thing at a time. Pair with good stuff, whatever that good stuff is that they like, pair it with that. Reward them for all brave moves, even if they're tiny, imperceptible, subtle moves, reward them for it. Assess their body language throughout. Keep them below threshold. Keep it fun. Always end on a positive note. Always. So, what if there's no improvement? What do I do? Be prepared for this to take some time, and be prepared for 2 steps forward and 5 steps back. The process really can be slow and painstaking, and patience is key. But you can always contact the foster department or myself with any concerns, and our emails are here. Okay. So are they ready for adoption? What are they looking for? So what we're looking for is for that cat or kitten to approach you and others without fear. They can retreat. They can need space from time to time. But what we're looking for is for them to respond to you with interest, okay? And for that to happen consistently. We would love it if they're actively seeking attention. That'd be fantastic. We are hoping to associate potentially fearful events with positive experiences. So anytime you're able to, you know, get that cat into a carrier and, you know, make it a positive experience as opposed to a terrifying experience, that would help. That would really make them more adoptable. But really what we're looking for is better confidence and resilience. We're just looking to reduce their overall fear. I don't have to be able to pick your kitten up. I certainly don't have to be able to pick your adult cat up. But what I do need is for them to have, as much as possible, generalize this new, more confident behavior to the point where they can meet other people successfully, to the point where you feel they can come back to the shelter without, you know, totally falling apart. I always, guys, I always expect a certain level of decompensation when they come back. That is no indication of your job as a foster parent. It just, the shelter is a very scary place, guys. So I expect often a good level of decompensation, and there's a plan in place for that when they come back. But you can have some sense of how they'll do if they are approaching you consistently, if they're trying to engage and play with you, if they're letting you pet them. Those things can all really help to know if they're ready for adoption. But what we're doing is giving them the tools to make decisions in their environment. We're not teaching them to tolerate experiences, we're teaching them to enjoy experiences. Okay. So, you know, if it takes you 4 weeks to be able to touch your adult foster cat, that could be a possibility, guys. That can happen. And that's okay. I don't want you to lose hope. I don't want you to feel like it's not working, because it will work. And, you know, there are always going to be some cats that we send out that, you know, they're just so poorly socialized that the work isn't going to do it. You know, we need to figure something else out. We need to shift our plan. Perhaps we need, and again, this, if we shift to a different foster, it has nothing to do with your ability as a foster parent. We need to provide them with a different environment, perhaps, that, you know, something completely out of your control. But sometimes it does come to a point where we have to come up with a different plan, and that's okay. That's what we're supposed to be doing, right? That's how it's supposed to work. So, but just having patience and having faith that working with them in a way that doesn't increase their fear, in a way that does increase a bond, in a way that does offer them a chance to give us some confidence, and for them to make those decisions on their own without us pushing them. That's kind of what this is all about. So hopefully that was some helpful information. But feel free to reach out to us at any point, and we can work through whatever issues you're having. And I'm afraid to make this larger because I'm afraid I will shut it off. So anyway, thank you guys for everything you do. And we 100% cannot do what we do without you. It just can't happen. The lives that you save and the differences you make for these guys, it just can't happen without our foster parents. So hopefully you got some helpful information. At the very least, know that we are here to help you with anything. And yeah, thank you so much for everything you do, guys. Sorry about the technical issues with my videos. If you'd like to see them, I can certainly share them with you. But yeah, thank you, and hope you're all well. Thank you.